Hello ladies and gentlemen, just got done gooning to Capella from ReZero. In today's video, I want to talk about Sparxie and Yao Guang and my final thoughts about them. Right, now to quickly go over it, the two main guesses I made when their kits first came around was that I believed Sparxie would end up being a sub DPS for a future Elation character because her kit had the exact same structure as Everknight's, and I also thought that her Eidolons are kind of mid, right? So she didn't seem to have that strong of like an E2 investment as compared to some other characters. On top of this, she also once again is a sub DPS. And then Yao Guang, one thing I was wrong about was I thought her E1 was mid. I thought it was bad, right? However, I recently saw a calc from someone, and apparently Yao Guang's E1 is actually really good. It increases the total team's damage output by about a total of 30%, which is pretty hefty, right? That's a pretty strong E1. That's like Everknight E1 levels in Mono Remembrance, right? Very, very strong. So with that said, let's get into it. Sparxie. How does she look as a main DPS power-wise? Now, currently, she isn't the strongest, right? She is strong, but she's not the strongest. She is like, I'd say, leaning towards high tier Amphoreus DPS level with these characters having their best in slot teams. However, in my opinion, what makes Sparxie impressive is that she is not in her full main DPS team, and even when she does get her full main DPS team, that still probably won't be her strongest team, right? For those who don't know, when Sparxie gets 3 Elation units on her team, she gains more Thrill Gen, which she can use in place of skill points for her skill, right? So with 3 Elation characters, you'd be able to do much more consistent high SP consumption skills. On top of this, obviously, like an Elation Sustain would probably buff her to some extent and buff the team. They'd probably have some damage output because all Elation characters have an Elation skill. And then last but not least, EMC is free, right? So you don't even need to spend any money on EMC. If EMC does end up being a sustain and it's leaked he's supposed to release in 4.2, she gets a free upgrade. Her main DPS becomes even stronger, and now she's probably on the same level as like Mono Rem, if not stronger. And once again, this probably won't be her strongest team, right? Her strongest team will likely be as a sub DPS next to Yao Guang and EMC for either Silverwolf or Yai, or even possibly both, right? So with all that being said, Sparxie has really good potential. She is dual role, meaning she has more value, and this isn't an Aglaia situation, right? Her Eidolons, not the craziest upgrade. I'd say especially, right? They're already like not that special for her own main DPS, but especially if you plan on putting her as a sub DPS in the future, it's likely that this Eidolon value will decrease even more, right? Because the E2 is basically completely dedicated towards her own damage output being increased, right? So with that being said, I wouldn't really recommend going into her Eidolons. Her Lycone, she actually does have a pretty big Lycone jump, okay? Here, if you are a low spender, the Battle Pass cone is apparently about only 20% worse, if not less, as compared to her signature. And this is S1, right? S5, it's even less of a difference. So for my low spenders out there, I'd say pick up the Battle Pass cone for Sparxie. That's probably going to be there in 4.0. You don't need to worry about her signature at all, right? And then, if we compare to like actual free-to-play obtainable Lycones, this is obviously where the problem arises. It's basically like a 35 to 40% jump. This isn't like new, right? It isn't like an astronomical jump. This is actually pretty in line with most of the Amphoreus characters in the first place, but nobody likes this level of a Lycone jump, right? So I will say, if you are not a low spender who can afford the Battle Pass Lycone and you really want to run main DPS Sparxie, then I would recommend picking up her Lycone, right? Now, her Lycone, even though it will still retain a good amount of value in sub DPS because of it buffing everybody's elation damage, obviously her being a sub DPS having this Lycone is going to be less valuable than the main DPS getting their Lycone and the main DPS getting their Eidolons, right? So once again, if you really want to run main DPS Sparxie, you can go up to her E2, and I would recommend getting her signature Lycone if you can't buy the battle pass. However, if you do plan to run her as sub DPS in the future, Eidolons, in my opinion, aren't all that worth it as far as I can tell currently. Her Lycone probably also won't be the most worthwhile thing to pick up. I mean, I was talking about it at the beginning of this video, right? Or was I don't remember. But Yao Guang's E1 is a very big jump, right? It's a very big performance jump, and increases the elation team's damage by about 30% from just grabbing her E1. So I'd honestly prioritize Yao Guang's E1 since there's a much higher chance that she's a third slot for both of these elation DPSs, right? And Yao Guang's Lycone, okay, this is crazy, right? So I looked at a calc for it. Yao Guang's Lycone is about 4% better than the free-to-play obtainable 4-star cone that increases team elation damage that we're getting on her patch, right? So Yao Guang's Lycone is, in all honesty, a complete skip, right? A easy, complete skip. It's not really worth grabbing at all. However, her E1 is high value. This is like something normal at this point, basically, right? You have like E1 Rowan May, you have E1 Robin, you have E1 Tribby, you know, characters like that. I guess E1 Evernight. This is kind of the same scenario where she has that E1 bait that is incredibly strong for the elation team. For those who don't know what it is, elation damage ignores 20% of defense shred, which is like a Ruan Mei E1, nothing special. But then when she uses her ultimate and her own AHA instant axe, it gains a fixed like 40 punch line, right? Meaning the damage is like astronomically increased for that AHA instant that Yao Guang instigates. So Yao Guang, the optimal investment is looking like E1, and her Lycone's looking like a complete skip, and her future value is looking very high because we recently got a leak that we are not going to be getting almost any elation characters at all after 4.2, right? It's pretty, you know, I'd be pretty hard pressed if they actually, you know, manage to get rid of Yao Guang in some of these elation teams, right? I think she's going to be staying there, so the E1 is for sure worth it. Plus, her banner is running throughout the entirety of 4.0, so it's even easier to grab it, right? And then Sparxie, I think if you are planning to run her as a sub DPS, you can easily get away with E0 as 0. However, if you're trying to, you know, enjoy the main DPS experience until the Annie comes around, then I would say Lycone's worth pulling on if you can't afford the Battle Pass cone. And Eidolon's, right? It's kind of mid, right? It's not the worst thing in the world, right? It's not like a Noxa E0 to E2. However, it's not really anything exceptional, right? So that's all I got for you guys today. That's my thoughts on both of these characters. I think they're both going to have a good amount of value for one or both of the 4.2 anniversary characters. They are probably going to be a new power ceiling. I've seen people being like, oh, you know, Sparxie main DPS isn't power creep. Maybe they're changing their ways. But as I was saying earlier, Sparxie's currently getting nerfed by not having a third elation character in the game. And she's probably going to have an even stronger team than this theoretical 3 elation main DPS team paired with either Yai or Silverwolf. So we are probably going to get the HP inflation and the power creep on the Annie, as unfortunate as that is. Let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments. Are you going to go for either or of these characters? Are you going to skip them? Me personally, I am going to try and get them, right? I'm especially going to be trying for that E1 Yao Guang. If I can't get it, oh well, right? Love you all. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great night. Peace out.